Today's daf is daf Nun Aleph. We are going to begin at the top by Esvei. Esvei Rabbi raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Nachman from the Mishnah. Basis is the structure for which the punishment of stoning was implemented. It was a height of two people. It's on the law, and it was taught in the regards to the Brisa when two-person height of structure is combined. With the sides of Kamah Sholish, either one being stoned is a total height equals three people. And if it enters in your mind that there is an impact capable of causing death, and if it's less than 10 tefachim deep, why do I need all this height? So the time made Rav Nachman answered, according to your reasoning, now with Asar, let us make the structure a minimum of 10 tefachim. Why must it have a height of two people? Like Rav Nachman, what does it mean? You should love your fellow like yourself. Teaching that even with regards to a condemned prisoner, select a good, a compassionate death to him. Therefore, the structure used for stoning is constructed so high that he dies quickly without any unnecessary suffering. Let us raise the structure even more so that his death will be even less painful. This is not also because if he fell from a greater height, his overwood should be crushed and be greatly, completely disfigured, which is certainly not a way, one word for that. To that Esvei, the Rabbi raised the objection to the opinion of Rav Nachman. The Torah requires constructing a parapet, the roof of one's house, to prevent anyone from falling to his death. Torah says, if a man falls from it, a man knew from it teaches the liability exists only for failing from the roof to the house, but not onto the roof of the house. How so? If the area of the Rosh Hashanah was 10 tefachim higher than a private house, and the owner did not construct a fence between his house and the public domain, and someone fell from inside the Rosh Hashanah onto it, if the Rosh Hashanah was 10 tefachim lower than the house, and the owner did not construct a fence on his roof, and someone fell from the roof of the house into the Rosh Hashanah, it enters in mind that there is a sufficiently strong impact that to cause death, even a height of less than 10 tefachim. Why do I need to have 10? Rahul said to him, Shani Bais, the halacha, the parapet of the roof of the house is different. So, it's any structure less than 10 tefachim is not classified as a house. Only a house requires a parapet. Rava objects, if so, if the requirement to build a parapet is limited to a house that is 10 tefachim high, also now, where the house is 10 tefachim higher than the when measured from the outside, so remove the height of the ceiling and the plaster, which is, when measured from the inside, in this manner, his height is not 10. According to you, then it's not classified as a house. Who said to him, where he hollowed out extra space inside the floor of the house so that its height would be 10 tefachim. Robert challenges him, in a situation, if in a situation when the house of not 10 tefachim from the outside of the wall, then so then if it's a situation when the house is not 10 tefachim outside as well, you can find a scenario where it's 10 tefachim from the inside, such as where you hollowed out extra space in the floor, thereby transforming into a house with the required height. Why then would a person be exempt in that case? At the higher time of the Rav Nachman, rather, the previous explanation must be entirely rejected, and this is the reason of Rav Nachman, when he ruled that one must suspect that the ox organs were crushed upon falling into the water channel. The silver decreases the two of the Kamah. The following is, how far is the distance from the stomach of the ox to the ground? 4 tefachim. Arita, the Dalit Kamah Shita. How far is the distance from the stomach of the ox to the ground? It's 4 tefachim. How deep is the water channel or canal? Is 6 tefachim. Arita the Dalit Kamah Sarah, so that's 10. Therefore, it transpires when the ox hits the ground is from the height of the 10 tefachim that hits the ground, so it's landed on his stomach and not on his feet. Otherwise, in the funny, rather, they're more asked, regard to the Mishnah teaches. So why not just say that with the pit with 6 tvachim would also be sufficient? So I'm the Chacham said in reply, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the ganda lebir, the animal rolled into the pit, in which the pit would be required to have a depth of 10 tvachim. By contrast, if it fell while walking the extra height, the rat to the stomach, it is including calculating the 10 tvachim. If a pit belongs to 2 partners, was uncovered and over a lower so the first partner passed by did not cover it, and the second passed by did not cover it, so then the second one is chayav for any damage caused by the means of the pit. Amri, they said, how can you find a case of a pit belonging to 2 partners? This works well according to the Rabbi who holds that a person digs a pit on his own property and then declares the property, but not the pit ownerless, and then he is chayiv. So then you can find it a case where the quarter belongs to both of them and the pit belongs to both of them, and they are mafka ownership of the property, but not mafka ownership of the pit. In that case, both are responsible for any damage caused. But if a person, if he holds that one who digs a pit on his own property and then declares it ownerless, is part of liability for damage caused. So then, how can you find a case where a pit for which a person is chayiv? Must be so how can you find a case of a pit belonging to 2 partners in the Rosh Hashanah? If they both jointly appointed a shliach, they said, go dig a pit for us, and he went and dug a pit, and then you have another issue that there's no agency of transgression. And the digger is solely responsible. This partner dug a pit of 5 tvachim, and this partner dug 5 tvachim, then the stock a little wiserishan. So then the first partner has been removed, and all the responsibility rests upon the second partner who deemed the pit to be 10 tvachim, which is the minimum depth through which one is chayav for an animal's death. Therefore, it's also not treated as a jointly owned pit. So this is Rabbi. This works well according to the opinion of Rabbi. And you find a case of damage that both would be chayav, as I will explain. But according to the opinion of Rabbi, according to Rabbi, the first person is not held chayav all in the case where the pit caused the animal death. According to the opinion of the Rabbanon, then where do you find it? They both extracted a chunk of earth from the bottom of the pit simultaneously. They completed the depth 10 tvachim. My Rabbi, my Rabbanon. Now, have you mentioned the machlekes between Rabbi and the Rabbanon? What is the opinion of Rabbi and the Rabbanon? Tanya, we learned in the Brayz. A person digs a pit 9 tvachim deep, and another comes and completes the pit. The last one's chayav. Rabbi says Rabbi says one follows the latter for the restitution for death caused by the pit. In other words, the latter one is solely responsible since only a pit of 10 tvachim renders a person chayav for an animal's death. And one follows both of them for restitution of damage caused by the pit. What's the reason of the chachamim? The pasuk says, if a man shall open a pit or shall dig a pit. If he is chayav for opening, then kriya, right? Koshkin, for digging is rather, the pasuk serves to include the case of one person who begins to dig pit after he does so, a second pit and continues. If you remove the action of the first digger and it bears full responsibility of the pit. For Rabbi will tell you, there's 2 clauses of the pasuk that are both necessary. What's the reason of if a man shall dig a pit, one without 2, indicating if 2 people jointly created the pit, the second bears responsibility and not the first. For Rabbi, If a man digs a pit, and not liable if the ox digs a pit. It says man written twice. Because of high. So since they wrote the first clause, God in the wording, soon they wrote the second clause at the same fashion. For what do you know that Torah intends to render specifically the latter one chayav for the damage? Perhaps it is rather as the first one who started the digging liable for the damage. Just as this Talmud says by Mesi Ali, that karka shall be with him who the Ka'avid Misa, indicating that is the one who causes the death, the second one who was chayav, not the first. This is because it's the second one who completed digging necessary depths for causing depths and not for the first. And the carcass shall be from him necessary from which Rabbi states, he says, and with regard to the disqualified consecrated ox that fell into a pit, which means where the carcass belongs to him. Amri, the Chacham said in response, can you learn from the words and emphasis of the pasuk by itself that we're dealing with the Bahida of Misa Skin, we're dealing with one who causes the animal's death? The pasuk can serve as a source for both ways. Person digs a pit of 10 tvachim, and another comes and completes another, makes it 20. Another comes and makes it 30, they're all chayiv. But still, why? Because it says a person digs a pit at the depths of 10 tvachim, another came and plastered it and cemented it, ladder is chayiv for damage, and not the first. Rabbi, I can tell you, no. They're both Rabbanon. The last one is chayiv only where the first one did not make the pit sufficient measurement to cause death, but less than the 10 tvachim. But where the first one made a pit of sufficient measurement to cause death, such as in the case where the first one dug 10 tvachim himself and is subsequently deepened further by others, the chayiv will be the chayiv. Mar asks of us, see it, but the second verse says where he plastered and cemented it. The Ka'avid Kamah Misa, the first made a pit of sufficient measurement, caused death, and nevertheless the Brisa teaches us the last person is chayiv. So Amri, so they said, Misa. There it's referring to the case where the pit did not have fumes capable of leading to death, since it was very wide. And then the other came, and by narrowing it with plaster and cementing, and he added to the characteristics of having fumes capable of leading to death. Talking about a case where the pit does not have sufficient fumes in it that were capable of leading to either death or damage. And he added it, the characteristics of having fumes capable of leading to both death and damage. Rava says, the person who placed a stone at the opening of a pit, less than 10 tvachim, and brings it to the pit to the depths of 10 tvachim. Isn't it obvious? This is precisely the case. They're not being machlekes. So what does Rava's statement add to this? You would say that there's a distinction between a person deepening the pit at the bottom, in which case it is like lethal fumes that he caused that kills the animal. But in the case at the top of the pit, where it's not lethal fumes that kill it, he would say not Kamah therefore. But it says Tom Tefach. Someone dug another tefach in a pit that was 10 tvachim, 9 tvachim deep, so that it reached a depth of 10 tvachim, and subsequently closed up that tefach into the pit. We see the kavanah that he removed the stones that he had placed at the opening of the pit, so that the depth of the pit was reduced to less than 10 tvachim. Wow, what's the halacha? Do we say that when he did increase the depth of the pit as 10 tvachim, he has removed it? Or perhaps by closing it up, he removed the action of the first digger, and now he entirely moves his possession take. Regard to a pit that is 8 tvachim deep and 2 handbreadths that contain water, what's the halacha? Chayiv. Why am I called tefach the maya? Each handbreadth of water is like 2 handbreadths of dry space. Therefore, the pit is effectively 10 tefachim in depth and contains sufficient quantity of lethal fumes to render it unreliable. A pit was 9 tefachim deep, and from that measure, 1 handbreadth contained water. What's the halacha? Then we say that since there's not a large quantity of water, and in that case stated by Rabbi Chana, the pit does not have sufficient quantity of lethal fumes to render the dig reliable. Or perhaps it can be argued that since the pit is deeper than one of the previous cases, it does have lethal fumes despite containing less water. Similarly, the question is, a pit that is 7 tefachim deep and there are 3 tefachim containing water. What's the halacha? Then we say that since there's a much larger quantity of water in the case, it's equivalent to a pit 10 tefachim, and therefore has lethal fumes. Or perhaps this is not as deep, there's no fumes to take. What's if one widened the opening of a pit that was already 10 tefachim deep? He said by doing so, he has actually reduced the lethal fumes. On the contrary, by widening the opening of the pit, he has brought the potential damage closer to the animal that might fall inside. Rashi says, let us see. If the animal died because of the lethal fumes, the one who widened the pit should be exempt. Why? Since he reduced the lethal fumes. If the animal died because of the impact, he has brought the potential damage closer. Other people say, let us see if the animal fell on one side that he widened, he has brought the potential damage closer. If he fell on the other side, he reduced the lethal fume. Pit depth is equal to its width. A pit always contains lethal fumes unless its width is greater than its depth. He says it never contains a quantity of lethal fumes sufficient for liability unless it's greater depth that its width. So when the Rikol digger is exempt, the first partner passed and the pit did not cover it. At what point is the first potter from the pit? From the time he leaves the other partner using it. And the other one says the first is absolved of responsibility only when he conveys to him his bucket, which would draw water from the pit. This is person who draws water from a cistern. And his friend comes and says to him, Hanachli, leave me, and I will draw water. Once he leaves him, he says, leave me and I will draw. So it says once the first leaves, the second person, while the person using the cistern is now potter. The first person is not absolved of responsibility until the time when he conveys his bucket to the second person. He says there is Pereira, this designation. Accordingly, the principle in a situation where certain aspects are not initially clearly defined can become clarified retroactively as a certain action or event occurs. The Halacha treats all aspects as being clearly defined and identified from the outset. In this case, the water is considered divided between the partners even before they draw it. When they do draw it, it's treated as Haimi de Kamah, this one filling up from this part, location of which has now been determined retroactively. Haimi de Kamah, this one is filling from this part. In case of partners that vow not to derive benefit from each other. Extreme the corners of Chatzir, the Ostas go to the Chatzir, but it does mean like him is a Nichas and Seich Shalei. It was a this one enters into his portion of the court, and this one enters into his portion. My if you give those, this one enters his part, this one enters his part. Blazer Ben Yanke, Omer Blazer, and we mentioned this a lot, sitting a bucket to transfer from so they did a bit of mercies. Omer Blazer says, Hamir buys the Chavere, one who sells a cistern to another. Once the seller conveys his bucket to the buyer for drawing the water of the cistern, the buyer acquires. What's the case? If he's acquiring the cistern, that means they're paying money, they'll let him pay money. Then really actually boy, the Mirali, And in that case, so usually you must say to him, Lich Chazak Ukni, go and take possession, thereby acquire for yourself. But in that case, once you give his bucket to him, it's like he says, go take possession, thereby acquire it. Therefore, once he begins drawing water from the cistern, is acquired it through taking possession. A person who sells a house to another, once he conveyed the key to him, he has acquired. If it was a transaction by paying money, then let him acquire by paying money. And if it was taking possession, then let him acquire its possession. What's the significance of transfer the key? The Gemara says actually the transaction occurred by taking possession. And the transaction occurred by taking possession, and in that case, the seller usually must say thing, go and take possession, thereby acquire it to yourself. And once he conveys the key to him, he's going to say like one who says to him, go take possession, thereby acquire it. With regard to the person who sells a flock of sheep to another, once he conveys the mashkuchis to the buyer, Kani is acquired the flock. What are the circumstances in this case? Even Mashiach, if he's transactionally occurred by pulling the flock into his possession, then let the buyer acquire by pulling. Even Mashiach, if it was by conveying, then let him Mashiach. The more says Mashiach, rather really says Mashiach, boy the name relay, and it's necessary for the sale. Let Mashiach Kni go and pull it, and must say to him, keep it the mashkuchis. In that case, once he conveys the mashkuchis to him, command Amle let Mashiach Kni. It's like he says, go and pull him apart. My mashkuchis, what's the mashkuchis? Okay, that give me here in Bava, they translate it as karkashta. It's like a bell that the shepherd rings and whose socks sounds the flock follows. I can remember it's like the goat that goes at the front of the flock. It's the explanations are back as similar to that which is written linen ton in the presence of a priest concerning this goat. Kadrogis raya al-ana, when a shepherd is angry with his flock, Ovid lenagdis masa, he renders the goat leading them blind. Similarly, when Hashem is angry with the Jewish people, he appoints unsuitable leaders for them.